In this video, I want to talk about repotting African violets from seed, potting them up into the next biggest pot. And if you saw the video yesterday and the day before, we had a tornado come through, which is extremely unusual for us. We get tornado warnings all the time, but to actually have one touchdown in about 3 places was unusual. And I mention that because we did have warning, but I didn't have enough warning to get all the plants in. And so my young trees that are in like 1-gallon pots, they were blown all over the place, right off the porch, all over the place. And so what I'm doing today, I didn't get any damage really, so but what I'm doing is reminding myself of plant things, plant care, and ways to prepare. Now, it's not only to save the trees, but one of the pots out there is like a 15-inch across clay pot with a cotton plant in it. And if that had gotten picked up, it could hurt somebody. Anything outdoors becomes projectiles. So today what I'm doing is reorganizing the plants, and one of the things I've done, and my living room is a disaster, I had been starting the cotton plants in a fish tank, and out of, I think I had 15 cotton plants, I only ended up with about 7 plants. So what I've done now is take the pots that I had those seeds in, I've washed them all out and they're drying. And these are orchid pots, technically. They're about 3 inches deep and about 2.5 across each way. But they're technically orchid pots. I need to use them for the African violets, even though, ideally, an African violet pot is only half that height. So you could use a 2-inch square or a 2.5-inch square pot that's only 2 inches tall. Now, I have successfully grown African violets in these taller pots before. It's just that African violets like shallow root systems. So when I do this, I'm not going to fill these up completely. So you really want a pot about as high as where my thumb is. I'm going to fill the dirt to about here. What I need to do is make sure that in my case, the leaves are high enough to get enough light. I don't want to bury the plant in the darkness of the pot. So it's better to put them a little bit taller in a tall pot if that's all you have, than it is to, stick with the shallow root thing and put them way down here and then they don't get enough light. So there are the pots. There's my spare fish tank. And I have a couple of things. They used to be called Charita Tamianas, and now I think they're Distigma Tamianas. I have to look up the name again. They've been reclassified like 3 times, but they're a relative of the African violet. And these are my African violets. And you can see, even on this one, see this one, how it's a little bit darker? That's probably going to be a blue or a violet blossom. The paler ones are going to lean toward white or yellow or pink. But they have to come out of here. I have about 25 plants. And as I said, I'm going to pot them up in this. And in my case, I'm going to keep this whole setup in the wagon for 2 reasons. I don't have a lid with a fluorescent light or an LED light for this fish tank. African violets can take a little bit lower light. So I have 2 choices. I either put all of these plants on a windowsill, or I put them in this and move them around depending on where the brightest light is in the house. I'm also going to use my shopping cart that you may have seen me use for a lot of things. That is going to hold the geraniums. And again, I'll be able to move it around the house depending on the light. Now, yesterday, what I should have done, we had a warning at about 10 o'clock. I should have gotten all the geraniums and all the small trees into the bathtub. But it happened to be that my dog has added alerting to tornadoes to her tasks all by herself. And the night before, we had a warning, and she's the one that woke me up before the alarms went off. So she just would not settle down and made me get up. And we had about 10 minutes warning on that one. I wouldn't have had enough time to do anything with the outside yard, and we would have needed to be in the bathtub. So, if the tornado had come through that time. So you need to be aware of both making sure you can eliminate projectiles in your yard, but at the same time keep the space open for yourself to be safe. So by doing this, this will have African violets, cacti, some of the outdoor plants can fit in the front here. The bigger cart is going to have all the geraniums, and then the only thing I would need to do is bring the trees in, and I could just put them on the floor. So what I'm doing is condensing my plan to make sure all my plants are where they need to be in an emergency or in a storm. The advantage to growing the African violets in a tank, I had a blizzard once and I lost most of my African violets because the heat was off for 3 days. And even though I had them bagged and in the light and everything, they didn't make it. So, but this is the size that you want to transplant them, and they're about 1 inch to 1.25 inches tall. And in some cases, there are 3 or 4 in each one. So at this age, you want to separate them into individual pots. The I'm still calling them chiritas. The chirita Tamianas, these reseed very easily. So these are going into small medicine cups, and they're going to be in an individual, similar fish tank setup. Otherwise, I'll end up with them invading everything. So these are some of the things to do all the time, so that when you do have a storm or an emergency come through, you can secure or cover your plants to save them, as well as with outdoor plants, keeping them from being a danger to anybody.